Okay, so the recording is in progress, and oh my goodness, I see we have a few more people still coming on. It is, however, 8 minutes after the hour, so I think I will officially begin. So, an official Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to the Hawaii Inter-Island Chevrah Kadisha series. The Hawaii Inter-Island Chevrah Kadisha, for those of you who may not know, we call it HIC for short, is a nonprofit 501c3 charitable organization dedicated to sharing information, resources, and educational programs concerning Jewish end-of-life and mourning practices, and it's also a support organization for Chevrah Kadisha groups across the Hawaiian Islands. Tonight's presentation is also co-sponsored by 4 amazing California organizations. Temple Sinai from Oakland, if you're from there, you can wave. Congregation Netivot Shalom from Berkeley. Hello.
Yep.
Congregation Beit El from Berkeley.
Didn't make it.
No, that was a couple days, that was a couple times ago.
Please mute everybody. Please mute.
And Valley Chevrah Kadisha from Los Angeles. So that is all of our co-hosts. And for those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Rabbi Nechama Neve, and I'm the president of HIC. If you would like to share any dedication for tonight's learning, you can type them into the chat, which Yael will be monitoring. And I'm very excited about tonight's presentation. We have generally about 3 educational presentations per year, and this is our first 2023 presentation. Our guest speaker, Dr. Simcha Raphael, is a psychotherapist as well as a rabbinic pastor ordained by the late Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi. And he's a longtime death awareness educator and has written extensively about mysticism, spirituality, death, afterlife, and bereavement, including near-death experiences and reincarnation. So we got a whole slew of expertise there. Before I hand the microphone over to Reb Simcha, though, let's take a few minutes of silence to prepare ourselves to optimally receive from his presentation. So if you all would please close your eyes, turn off radios or Super Bowl or anything that's going on in the background. And now take a few deep breaths. Breathe in with your nose and out with your mouth. Now allow yourself to relax. Now simply sit in silence, putting aside all extraneous thoughts and focus on being open to receive inspiration, wisdom, and understanding. Adonai, you grace humans with wisdom and teach humanity perception. Bestow upon us your knowledge, insight, and understanding. Blessed are you, the granter of wisdom. Baruch atah Adonai, honen hada'at.
Amen.
So welcome back, everyone, and I'm handing it over to Reb Simcha.
So I want to thank you, Rabbi Nechama. You called me when I guess it was almost 9 months ago, 7 months ago, and so that planted the seed. And Alice tended to the weeds and all of the details. And so I want to thank both of you and all of the co-sponsors. And my number here is up to 99. So I have to tell you this story. Let's he's starting going off script, be warned. But it reminds me the very, very first teaching I did on death and afterlife in Judaism was at the Poughkeepsie Jewish Community Center. And I was doing something on afterlife and the soul, a conversation with elders. And there was a program going on simultaneously on bingo. And people would walk in my room and say, is this bingo? We'd say, no, this is afterlife. And they left. So I ended up with like a half a dozen people, right? And actually, now that we have all these squares here, we can play bingo. But it really speaks to what 40 years in the culture, it was over 40 years ago, actually, what 40 years in the culture has done in terms of the spiritual thirst that people have for Jewish wisdom around death, dying, and afterlife. So I want to thank all of you who are involved in some way, shape, or form in Chevrah Kadisha, in Jewish burial practices, and honoring the needs of the dead. Thank you all for building communities, and thank all of you for being here. Okay, we just hit 100, so that's a good place to start. So my thanks to all of the sponsors. I think I got everybody in here. And what I want to talk about is both the what and the so what. What does Judaism have to say about life after death? And the so what? So what do we do with that? How does that help us think about dying and death and mourning and loss, and in particular around Chevrah Kadisha, around what goes on for people in the act of preparing a body for burial, and what goes on for the soul in those moments. So actually, I want to invite you to unmute yourself and let's do the blessing for Torah study. But I want to hang on. I'm going to go on and off screen. I want to invite you to think about someone that you want to dedicate the merit of our study to, just in your own mind, in your own heart. It's traditional to do study for the zechut, for the sake of the soul, for the sake of helping the soul ascend further. So think of who it is in your heart and your mind, and if there's multiple people, think of a few folks in your heart and your mind. And join us as we create this cacophony of sounds as we say the bracha for Torah study together on 3. 1, 2, 3. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu Holy One of blessing, majesty of all time and space, thank you for this opportunity to soak in these holy words of Torah, an improvisational translation. So I want to tell you a story that goes like this. I used to be young and foolish. Now I'm just foolish. But this is I don't know, I guess this is almost 40 years ago. Probably more than that. I had a friend. I'm going to go off screen and then I'll go back on screen. I hope I won't make you dizzy. I had a friend in my in high school and then later in college. Genius. And we were buddies, and he was somebody needs to mute themselves. He was at my house one night. I was one of these hip Jewish guys. I had a date coming over, and I was cooking a meal, and he was helping me cook the meal. And he was from a traditional home, so the end of Shabbos came on Saturday evening. He said he was going to go see his father. We said our goodbyes. The date came over. The meal turned out to be fine. And in those years, I could go out onto the streets of Montreal to go to a cafe or a club at 2 a.m. And I walked out of the cafe that we were in, and there was a full moon. And I pointed to the full moon, and I said, there's something very auspicious about that moon. I don't know what it is, but there's something very auspicious about that moon. Took her home, went to sleep, and at about 5 a.m, the phone rang. it was another friend of mine telling me that the friend I had been with earlier that evening had just been killed in a car accident, like that. And the next morning we were planning his funeral. And if you would have said to me, Simcha, you're going to spend many years of your life talking to people about dying and death, I would have said, you know what, that's somebody else's life. That wasn't what I imagined for my life at 22 years of age. But very early on, I felt a sense of his presence. At the cemetery, the sign cemetery said Mount Pleasant Memorial Park. I promise you there was nothing pleasant about burying a 23-year-old kid in the dead of Canadian winter. During the Shiva, but I felt his presence at the cemetery. During the Shiva, a few of us were sitting around saying, didn't it feel like Les was in the room? Later that year, he appeared to me in a dream. And actually, it turns out there's a whole tradition of the dead appearing to people in dreams. And when I began to look around what Judaism had to say about life after death, there was very, very little. You can go to the Tibetans and read about the Tibetan Book of the Dead. You can go to Indian philosophy. You can go to Native American traditions, their traditions about the journey of the soul, certainly Christianity. But there was very little. And yet, I had already had a degree in religious studies. It didn't make sense to me. A few years later, I met my teacher, Reb Zalman. He said, oh, afterlife, you want to learn about afterlife, go here, here, and here. He basically said, don't look in the modern Jewish world, you're not going to find it. But in fact, go further into Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, in earlier layers of tradition. And eventually, what I did was I wrote the book that I would have wanted to read when I was 21, 22, and my closest friend was killed in a car accident. First, it was my doctoral dissertation. I was in California myself at the California Institute of Integral Studies. It came out in '94 as the first edition, and I'm proud to say it made it to the third edition. It'll probably still be around when I'm in the afterlife. So that's a little bit about how I got here, but I have to ask all of you a question. You know, I'm looking at my screens, and I'm saying, look, you know, here it is. Besides the fact that it's, you know, Super Bowl Sunday night, you're making a commitment of time to be here. These are people who are interested in Jewish learning. What did you learn about life after death in Judaism? Do me a favor. Look at the blank faces on the screen. Like I have 3 different Zoom screens to go through. I don't see anybody going, oh, I learned. Did anybody learn anything? Nothing. Someone wrote nothing. You studied Kabbalah. If this was my Catholic class with my Catholic graduate students, everybody would have learned something about life after death. And as a group of, you know, moderately sophisticated and educated Jews, everybody's giving me this blank stare. How come? Oh, somebody wrote nothing. Alice, somebody wrote nothing, so there's nothing to talk about. I'm going home early. This was the situation that I was dealing with. So what we're going to do is we're going to, you know what, I forgot, Alice, we didn't tell them that they had to be prepared to time travel. We're going to time travel, okay? We're going to go back to the 12th to the 14th century. We're going to interview some Kabbalists, and we're going to ask them about what they had to say about life after death. The text that are in the chat is the transcription of the interview already. So that's what we're going to do. In the next little while, we're going to look at Kabbalah, Hasidism, a little bit of transpersonal psychology. We'll put it together with a little bit of Kubler-Ross. We'll shake it all up, and I get to tell you in an hour or so my 20 years of integration of learning. So from here, I'm going to go to this one. Okay. Who's reading for me? How many? Some of you might have heard this one. You want to read this for me?
Yeah, go for it.
Please, Yael.
Judaism celebrates life and the living. It dwells on life here rather than on the hereafter, as other religious faiths do. Life is precious, the here and the now.
And here's one more. Go.
Dead is dead. What lives on are the children and a legacy of good works.
Okay. Life is precious here and now. We don't believe in afterlife like other religions, like Christians do. We don't. And dead is dead. What lives on are the children and good deeds. How many of you, put up your hand, heard a variation on that?
Yeah.
A lot of hands. All of a sudden, you're waking up.
Me too. Me too.
Okay, here's the story. This is very important. It's true, but it's only half true. What's true is Judaism does believe in the life and the living. Judaism never postulated that a transcendent world is superlative to this world. It's in this world that we make Shabbat. It's in this world that we do mitzvot. And even in our messianic yearning, it's not to live in a transcendent realm like St. Paul imagined, but rather to make this world and to become in this world, Mamlechet Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, to make this world holy. So life in the living is important. But that doesn't mean that Jews don't believe in life after death. In the pre-modern world of Isaac Bashevis Singer, of Shalom Aleichem, of the Hasidic masters, of the Kabbalistic Rebbes, there was never any question. They didn't sit around and say, "Well, Chaim, do you believe in afterlife?" I'm not so sure. They didn't. It didn't work that way. It did not work that way. It was hardwired into the tradition. So what happened? Where'd it go? It's not that Jews don't believe in life after death. It's that modern Judaism lost touch with it. What did you learn about afterlife? Anybody? Let me take a couple of responses. Did you learn anything? Yeah, are there any hands up?
Yes, Nancy has her hand up. Nancy, go ahead.
Nancy.
I learned through many ways that everyone goes to heaven. There's no such thing as being horribly tortured after you die. That it's much like a child with their parent the parent would never want the child to languish in a horrible way. And that it's like eating at a big table with a long fork where you learn how to feed each other or everybody will starve. But there's an uplifting and a wholeness in death.
Well, there's two things. There's two motifs that you have put together. This thing about the long hand and feeding each other is not even what happens after death. It's what happens in the Messianic age. So we mix up both what I call the individual, like Joe and Jane Jew, as opposed to the collectivity of Israel. But let's see, somebody else has a hand up. Let's get a couple of them and then we'll keep going, okay? Because
we have Joy. Joy has her hand up.
Go. Where are you, Joy?
So what I remember learning is that when the Messiah comes, that we will all be raised up and live eternal life. And that's why we get buried whole.
So what happens after death to the individual Jew as opposed to that which happens at the end of time and history with the Messianic age?
We have a few more people that want to respond.
That's part of the problem too, because we have this sense of a future vision. We sort of lost touch with a sense of the individual. One or two more, and then we'll keep going on. But I think you're making the point that we got little vignettes of it, but not a lot. Okay,
Joel and Michelle.
Hi, thank you. I learned that the word Gilgul means reincarnation. That it has to do with the circle, and that when we put on our wedding, when we get married and are given a wedding band, a ring, that it has to be whole, to be kosher, because it has to do with Gilgul, that we're saying, I want to be with you again lifetime.
Oh my goodness, I never heard that one. I certainly never read it in any of our texts, but we do have this notion of Gilgul, of reincarnation. So again, we got what happened at the end of time of the Messiah. We have this notion of reincarnation, which when I redid the third edition of my book, I quadrupled the amount of material I wrote on reincarnation, and that's in there. And we still, if it's 1 week after the death, you still haven't told me what's going on for the soul. And that's what I'm going to hear to tell you. Let's keep going. I know there's some more hands up, but I want to keep it. I want to sort of keep stirring up the pot and keep moving with you. So trust me, I make sure we're going to hear lots of different voices, but I want to put it into context. What we need to do is go back into the tradition of Kabbalah from the 12th century onward. The Kabbalists were interested in the mysteries of the universe, the creation of the universe, the creation of the soul, and what happens to the soul after death. And the Kabbalistic ideas get encoded in Hasidism, which is a later movement. The Hasidism was a sort of spiritual revival movement in Eastern Europe, founded by the Baal Shem Tov in the 1700s. Hasidism are not just the Jews in Brooklyn who sell diamonds. And it was actually a mainstream movement in a lot of ways. It was not a fringe movement. The nephew of the Gerer Rebbe was in the Polish parliament in the year 1900. So what Kabbalah does, what Hasidism does, is it takes ideas from Kabbalah and it brings it to the masses. So before we go on, I need to tell you a Hasidic story of the afterlife journey of the soul. You with me? I can tell you a story, and then sort of a la Joseph Campbell, we'll look at that story, and we'll look at some of the Kabbalistic texts, and I'll hear some more of your conversations, and we'll keep going. And in order to tell a story, I have to stand up. So we have to make sure you can still see me once I stand up. Okay. This is a story told of Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhensk. Elimelech of Lezhensk was one of the early and great Hasidic masters. And in his lifetime, he had a friend who was a great Torah scholar. And one day his friend came up to him and said, "My time to leave the world is rapidly approaching. Can you do me a favor?" So Elimelech says, "Sure, I'll do you a favor. Like, what do you need?" He says, "My son has not been educated in the ways of the Jewish people. Could you take care of him? Keep an eye out for him." And Reb Elimelech says to his friend, "Sure, I will, but on one condition." "What do you mean on one condition? What kind of condition do you make with a guy who's dying?" He says, "I'll take care of your son on the proviso you come back and tell me what it's like on the other side." It's a gentleman's agreement. The guy dies. Elimelech does everything to educate, take care of this young bucher, this young man. Comes time for the bar mitzvah. There were like 2 bands. He does this with really a lot of class, and made arrangements for a shidduch, an arranged marriage. Because in this culture, if you're going to educate a young boy, you can also make sure he has a life partner, whatever. The variant versions of the text say, that he could choose whatever gender he wanted to marry, but whatever. Comes the afternoon of the wedding. The guests are there. The bride is there. The groom is there. And Elimelech, who is the stand-in for the groom's late father, and also the officiating rabbi, was nowhere to be found. This was a problem. The hors d'oeuvres were getting cold. The guests were getting kvetchy. They wait an hour. They wait 2 hours. They send somebody to go look in the keyhole of the Rebbe's study. The Rebbe is meditating. Oh, you can't disturb the Rebbe when he's meditating. All right. After 3 hours, he comes. They do the wedding. They break the glass. They cry out, "Mazel tov, Mazel tov." And then at the reception, Reb Elimelech gets up to talk to the guests. He says, I suppose you were wondering where I was for all these 3 hours. Let me tell you a story. So he proceeds to tell the guests the story of the arrangements he had made with the groom's late father. And he says, here, I had fulfilled my part of the bargain and he hadn't fulfilled his. So I was sitting in my study meditating and I was waiting for him. I'm waiting for him and I hear, Elimelech, Elimelech. I go, Chaim, Chaim, is that you? What was it like? He said the following: the moment of death was absolutely painless. It was like taking hair out of milk. And I could see all the people standing around and crying and trying. I said, stop, I'm over here. But they couldn't hear me. They couldn't see me. I figured, they made a mistake. They'll figure it out and then it'll all be okay. And again, I could see the Chevrah Kadisha. By the way, you better pay attention to this part. I could see the Chevrah Kadisha, the burial society, preparing my body. And they were also busy, focused on all the specific details of what they were doing. They didn't even notice that I was around. And again, I said to them, you're wasting your time. But they couldn't hear me. They couldn't see me. All right, you know what? I decided they'll bury me. I'll come back. I'll explain to them what had happened. So everybody walks out to the cemetery. Again, nobody notices I'm around. They bury me. And then I have to dig out. I get very, very frustrated. I have to dig out of the ground to get back home to explain to them what had happened. And it starts to thunder and it starts to lightning. And I get so confused. And I think maybe I should stay where I am. No, I have to go. I have to dig. I have to go. I have to go. Do I stay? Do I go? Do I stay? I get so confused. I cry out, help. And all of a sudden, I could see before my eyes this great, great, great being of light. And this being of light says, don't you know, you're no longer in the world of confusion. You've entered the universe of truth. And instantly I could see a panoramic vision of every single deed I have ever done in my life. And I realize I now have to stand in judgment before the heavenly tribunal. And I wait. And I wait, and the judgment comes down that basically I have been a God-fearing man. I have tried to serve my Creator. I don't enter into Gehenna, purgatory. The footnote is there's no eternal damnation in Judaism, but there's purgatory. But there are ways in which I could have more fully served my Creator. I could have more fully lived my destiny. I certainly could have paid my temple dues on time, that's for sure. So I don't enter into the heavenly realm of Gan Eden, the heavenly Garden of Eden. So what's going to happen to me, I ask? So I'm assigned a resting place in between Gehenna and Gan Eden, where on one hand I see the lofty heights of the heavenly Garden of Eden, and on the other hand I see the torments of the underworld of Gehenna, and there I stay. Now, it says in Jewish tradition that on Shabbat, all souls are released from Gehenna. The first Shabbat comes, I enter into the heavenly Garden of Eden, and it was fantastic. It was sublime. It was blissful. But when Shabbos was over, the messenger from the heavenly tribunal says, come on, you have to go back to your resting place in between Gan Eden and Gehenna, to which I said, no. I said, I knew Reb Elimelech in my life. I have some pull around here. I don't want to go back. Let me in. So the messenger from the heavenly tribunal says, I know, let me go check. And he comes back. He says, it has been determined on high that you shall rightfully take your place in Gan Eden. Eventually. But it was also known that you made a promise in your lifetime to Reb Elimelech of Lezhensk. And until you fulfill that promise, you can't rightfully take your place in Gan Eden. So Reb Elimelech is at the wedding, at the reception. He's telling everybody this story. And he says, so I said, come on, let's go. Let's make a l'chaim. He says, where I'm going is so blissful, so sublime, I can't wait a second longer. So you go to the wedding and you make a l'chaim on my behalf. And when you do, you tell everybody at the wedding to tell everybody they know the story. and make a l'chaim on my behalf, and to tell everybody they know, the story, and to make a l'chaim on my behalf, as they tell everybody they know, and tell everybody they know, and make a l'chaim on my behalf. So what I want to say is l'chaim, 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 and I share with you that story exactly to the word as it was first shared with me. And that, my friend, is a Jewish view of the afterlife. It's a Jewish view of the afterlife. If Joseph Campbell were around, some of you remember he used to be on PBS late at night, he would talk about like the deeper structure of the myth. So if Joseph Campbell were around, he would help us understand. Let me see if I got this here. Okay, no, he's not here yet. Here's a story. One more time. The way we think about living and dying determines how we think about afterlife. Okay? The assumptions that we make about what it means to be human and what it means to be alive determines what it means, how we think about death and how we think about afterlife. So if we go into the Western materialistic science, right? What's his name? What's this guy's name? Simcha Freud, right? Simcha Freud says standing beside dead body of a loved one, human beings invented spirits in the afterlife. And what's his name? Stephen Hawking would say, consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain produced by the firing of neural synapses. So dead is dead. In the materialistic worldview, there's no such thing as afterlife. Dead is dead. And most of us, in a way, were pickled in the brine of that. If you went to medical school or nursing school or social work school, that was really the philosophical underpinning of your training, whether they told you overtly or not. If you go in a Christian context, okay, right, there's the elevator goes up and down. When it goes down, what does it look like? Somebody call it out.
Hell.
What's hell look like?
Fire.
Fire,
Fire and
brimstone.
damnation.
And then if you luck out, you see, you need to be redeemed, and Jews didn't get a chance, so they opt out of the whole system. And if you go up, what's it look like?
Heaven.
What else? What about heaven?
Gan Eden.
Clouds.
Clouds.
No
You know
pain.
why there's clouds?
Beautiful.
Because they let you smoke at the bar.
Angels.
That's why there's clouds in heaven.
Music.
They let you smoke at the bar. If you do the Kabbalistic point of view, this is the only fancy word I'm going to use, a human being is a bio-psycho-cosmic continuum. Okay? We are body, emotion, psyche, cosmos. This is the Yud-Hey Vav-Hey, the four-letter name of God. But instead of it being horizontal, it's vertical. So this is the physical, this is the emotional, this is the mental, this is the spiritual. This is what it means to be human according to Kabbalah. We are body, emotion, mind, spirit, and ultimately cosmos. Okay, that you can borrow a little bit from your yogic teachers also, but I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You know, how you doing? You know, my chair here is comfortable. There's a fairly good emotional vibe. I miss doing stuff like this in person. I would have loved to have been invited to Hawaii to do this. You know, cognitively, you think, I think this guy knows what he's talking about. I'm not sure, but you're willing to give me the benefit of the doubt. And then at some other level, we're all interconnected. That's the Kabbalistic view of what it means to be human. In death, each of those separate layers begin to separate like the undoing of a braided Havdalah candle. So we are an amalgam of body, emotion, mind, and spirit. And in death, as you will see, each of those realms separate out. You with me? Because I'm giving you the big picture, and then we're going to go into the details. Okay. We'll take a couple of questions in just a second. So let me go back here and let me see what I have no idea what's coming up next. Oh, so this is the triptych. Remember, for some of you will remember, we used to go to AAA to get a triptych of the journey. So this is my triptych of the journey. Okay, my map, my charts start in the bottom. I'm going to take you on the journey of physical separation, leaving go of the attachments to the body, emotional purgation, cleaning up the schmutz under the rug, intellectual contemplation in a sense of seeing God, and then spiritual unification in the sense of being God, merging with God. So body, emotion, mind, and spirit, separating from the body, cleaning up the unresolved emotional stuff of life, intellectual contemplation, seeing God through the higher mind, and then unifying with God. And as you'll see, they correspond with our Jewish rituals. I'm going to keep coming back to this chart, but that's basically where we're going. Okay, what we need to do now is fill that in with texts. I don't want to do a longer thing of questions, but if there's one or two, a question rather than a 7-minute treatise, we got time for that. Anyone? Any hands up, Yael?
No hands up. Feel free to use the raise hand feature if you do want to ask a question.
Good. Okay. So let's keep going. I'm excited with this material. So let's see what's next. Okay. So what we're going to do is the first thing is chibut hakever. I'm teaching you something new. That's another new term. They didn't teach you this in Hebrew school. This is very important if you do Chevrah Kadisha. Okay. This is one of my favorite graphics. Yael's going to read this, and it's going to raise some very interesting thoughts.
Rabbi
Go.
Yehuda said, "For 7 days the soul goes to and fro, from the house to the grave, from the grave to the house, mourning for the body."
Okay, so we're reading from the Zohar, which is Guadalajara, Spain, in the 12th, 13th century. For 7 days, the soul goes back and forth from the house to the grave, from the grave to the house, mourning for the body. And they never told you that in Hebrew school? That there's some intermezzo period after death? And what does it correspond with?
Shiva.
With the Shiva. With the Shiva. It corresponds with the Shiva. Oh, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. We focus on, wow, that was some Shiva. Who catered that? Oh man. Yeah, we've lost touch with the mystery of Shiva as a soul guiding ritual. For 7 days, the soul goes to and fro from the grave to the body, from the grave to the home, mourning for the body. Basically, look, it's not literal, but it's how would I say it? It's indicative of some kind of process that takes place. You know, it's the third night of the Shiva. You couldn't have another cold cut if they gave it to you intravenously. You just couldn't. You just couldn't. It's the third night already, and the two sisters are sitting around. Uncle Lou just left, so there's no more obnoxious sexist humor. And one sister says to the other, "Didn't it feel like Daddy was in the room?" And of course, one says, "Yeah, you know, you've been reading too much Shirley MacLaine." And she says, "No, I learned it reading Jewish Views of the Afterlife." But people have these experiences, and we have not had a Jewish framework to help us understand it. But that's a very, to me, that first of all, I love that graphic over there, but that's a very, very poignant kind of teaching here. Let me just go back to it because I want to build on this. It also speaks very specifically to the process that goes on in Chevrah. Okay, Chibuta Kever is said to be a 3 to 7 day period when the soul is potentially confused as to whether it's alive or dead. You know, some souls get out of here more quickly. If you've done any work in hospice, some souls are able to leave more easily, and some souls kvetch around and they stick around and they stick around. But there's this. Yael, this is now the spiritual philosophy that the Kabbalists teach about the post-mortem soul. Go.
There are 3 levels that comprise the soul, and therefore the soul has 3 names: Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama.
Go.
Nefesh remains in the grave until the body is decomposed and turned into dust, during which time it flits about in this world, seeking to mingle with the living and to learn of their troubles. And in the hour of need, it intercedes for them. It wanders about the world and beholds the body, which was once its home, devoured by worms and suffering the judgment of the grave.
I'm not doing the whole thing, all 3 of them, but it, again, we are taught, actually we haven't been taught, but one of the things is there's some energetic remnant that sticks around after death. Now I have to say something, okay? Usually when when teaching with 107 people on a Zoom screen is a little different than going into a conservative synagogue on a Sunday morning where there's 40 people who are like belching from the bagels and the lox that they just ate, okay? Usually when I do that, there's one guy sitting in the front row with his arms folded like this with a big fat ring, and he's bad vibing me. And he's saying non-verbally, I don't believe any of that afterlife shit. Now let's hear what you have to say. There's usually somebody like that. It may be your uncle. It may be somebody you know, right? There's somebody there. So if you're that person, I want to say this to you. I'm not selling belief. Okay? If somebody wants to say, oh, I don't believe in any of this afterlife, then fine. At least understand what Judaism has to say, okay? Because if I say believe and you say I don't believe, then we're in an adversarial relationship, but I'm not interested in that. I will sell you my book, by the way, and you can go to my website and order it from there. It's probably cheaper if you're in Hawaii to just order it directly from Amazon, right? But at least I want you to understand what Judaism has to say, because we've lost touch with that. Ultimately, everybody has to do their own meaning making around dying and death. I can't tell you what to believe. I can at least illuminate for you what Judaism has to say, and I think some of the ways it helps us think about dying and death. Okay? So at least that's, but let me just go back to this. I want to go here. Hang on. I want to go here. Body, emotion, mind, spirit, cosmos. For those of you who are shtickle yogis, there's this bioenergetic pranic body that sticks around. That's the nefesh. There's an emotional energy field. There's a mental energy field. There's a universal self, whatever that is, and there's oneness. So this is where I want to alight for a while, because I think this is important for a Chevrah Kadisha presentation to understand. You know, Alice said what people want to know, what goes on in a Tahara room. So here's what I want to say. Somebody read this. I mean, Yaya's been my reader. She's doing great. She's practiced. We worked on this for the last 3 weeks. We're both winging it, by the way. Do you know these photographs? This is the Prague Chevrah Kadisha commissioned a whole series of paintings. They're huge murals. So go. This is from Midrash on Psalms.
Do you want someone else to read it, Reb Simcha?
No.
Go ahead.
Please, you're doing great.
After the angel of death removes the soul from a person's body, the man dies right away. but his spirit comes out and sits on the tip of the nose until the body begins to decay. As decay sets in, the spirit, weeping, cries out to the Holy Blessed One, saying, Master of the universe, where am I to be taken? Immediately, Duma, angel of the netherworld, takes the spirit and carries it to the courtyard of the dead to join the other spirits.
Look, I don't know it happens exactly this way, but what it says to us is that there's some consciousness that survives bodily death that sticks around close to the body. So if you're doing a tahara, the question is what goes on in your heart and your mind when you're doing it. You may be attuning to all the details, but I think the practical application of this for doing tahara is practicing mindfulness. There was somebody, I lost touch with her a while ago. I don't remember who it was. Chaya, it wasn't you, I don't think, who was doing their rabbinic thesis on mindfulness and Chevrah Kadisha. I think she's. I'll Alice, if you email me, I'll remember her and I'll track her down. But that's what Chevrah Kadisha practice requires of you. First of all, you got to learn the mechanics of it, but the psycho-spiritual preparation is mindfulness. I remember I don't know if any of you, there was this wonderful program today on Jewish renewal legacies, and one of my friends, Chaim Rothstein, and when we were doing his tahara, I felt like he was saying, oh no, you have no idea. Simply, you think you've read about afterlife. Let me tell you what it's really about. So there was a sense of feeling the psycho-spiritual connection with somebody. I don't know exactly what happened that way, but my message to you is stay open. Stay open. Let me do one more screen share, and then we'll again take a couple of questions if they're there. See, because this is no. Actually, I don't have it here. Good. So we're going to do some other stuff. Anybody? A couple of comments, couple of questions. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to take you in Gehenna and take you out of Gehenna. Do I only have a half hour? I got to move quickly. Anybody? Some comments? I'm happy if you have comments. I'm glad to keep going on.
Is it
We have
different
a question
men?
from Shirley.
Is it different
Shirley.
for men and women? I want to just ask that question real quickly. Is it different for men or for women? Or is it the same?
You know, I don't remember since the last time I died. You know, I don't see how gender awareness makes a difference. The question is, how attuned is your intuitive system? It may be that women get to that a little more easily, but I don't know. You know, I'm an intuitive Cancer. I have a conjunction with Uranus, so I come to this very naturally. And I think we can all be trained. You know, people tell me stories of those synchronistic things that happened around death. People tell me stories about having a dream and then getting a phone call an hour later that so-and-so has just died. So I think the windows of perception are open if we're open to them. Okay. Along with this,
Well,
in the
well,
early,
Hold on, Reb Simcha. We have a question from Shirley. Go ahead, Shirley.
So here's my question. My father died 10 years ago. I didn't feel his presence after his death, but there's some trouble in the family right now, which he doesn't like at all. So he came back to me to tell me what he thought about it and
I believe
what
that.
he expected. And I feel him very close. So in your presentation, I hope you'll touch on, you know, you just laid out all these levels. Well, it's been a long time, but I feel him here now. So I'd like you to speak to that.
Okay. For you, I have a Kaddish Gehenna rep.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to move through a few texts because I think I want to make sure we have enough time to do that. Hang on, let me go here. Okay. So then this is I'm moving along, but this is some visionary stuff that happens either at the moment of death or immediately beyond it. Yael, please.
Rabbi Shimon said, "Have you seen today the image of your father or your mother? For so we have learned that at the hour of a person's departure from the world, their father or mother and other relatives gather round, and they see them and recognize them, and likewise all with whom they had associated with in this world, and they accompany their soul to the place where it is to abide."
So this is the visionary phenomena of ancestral guides or familial beings that's comparable to the near-death experiences where people are pronounced clinically dead and later resuscitated. Now, today, there is more resuscitation technology available than at any other point in human history. But how these guys, and we're guys, knew this in the 12th century in Guadalajara, Spain, I don't know. I mean, there's earlier stuff. The Kabbalah is not the earliest layer of this. But I think the point is, and I think the hospice and bereavement implications is, who do you imagine seeing when you leave the world? Because people, again, the hospice nurses now know that people often have this kind of stuff. Oh, my father, my father, my father. When I was first a hospice intern, some guy goes, oh, my brother, my brother, my brother. He ran out of bed. They put him back in bed. They strapped him down and they gave him Thorazine and he died within 24 hours. Today, they're much more aware of that. So this is one of the phenomena of the deathbed. There's two. There's the familial beings and then there's the mythic beings. Okay, there's sort of the mommy, daddy, Bubby Zadie. And then here, read this, please, Yael.
"No person dies before seeing the Shekhinah, and because of its deep yearning for the Shekhinah, the soul departs in order to see her. And with the Shekhinah, there come 3 ministering angels to receive the soul of the righteous. When one departs this world, they see many strange things on their way and meet Adam, the first human, sitting at the gates of Gan Eden, ready to welcome all who have observed the commands of their master."
So this is another phenomenological description of mythic guides. The Shekhinah, modern Jewish feminism notwithstanding, the Shekhinah is not a woman with tallis and Birkenstocks. Though if you do www.shekhinah.com, you'll see my wife's website and you might find that there. But the Shekhinah in rabbinic literature is sort of like an indwelling, a luminous presence of God. So there's Shekhinah, there's ministering angels, and we really lack an iconography. You know, so if I said Buddhism, you'd see the Buddha. We have an imagery. You'd see Mary or Jesus. We don't have an iconography of Adam, but here's Adam, right? But here's the deal. The Hindus see Krishna and the Christians see Jesus or Mary, and the Buddhists see the Buddha and Gabriel or Islam, and Gabriel in Islam. Who, you know, and you know who the Jews see? Someone from the Federation. You like that? We don't, you see, we don't have an iconography, but I have an uncle who was of the vintage that he ran away from the Tsar's army after World War I. And he was rabidly anti-religious. I mean, he hated religion. And I was in his house and he said, I nearly died. And the Rabban Gamliel came and said, Yoini, it's not your time. His name is Uncle Jonas. We call him John. Yoina. So he had a near-death experience, and this was not a guy who would have read Raymond Moody or seen Warren Beatty, Heaven Can Wait, or Defending Your Life, or any of those early near-death experience movies. He saw Rabban Gamliel from his Rabban Gamliel came and said, Yoine, it's not your time. Rabban Gamliel from his youth in a yeshiva in Europe shows up for him. So I don't know how this stuff works, Okay, it seems to me that there's some angelic or archetypal or mythic guides that get painted in cultural nuances of different colors. So the Buddhists pick up the images of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and the Hindus pick up images of Krishna and Vishnu and that, and my uncle Jonas picked up Rabbi Gamliel. I don't know. You know who the kids are? You know the kids are seeing in your children's near-death experiences? Yoda. Right? Yoda is a multidimensional, a transdimensional being. So look, I don't know how this works, but I think the message that I want to give, first of all, I'll do a non-paid, non-political announcement. May the angels carry you, Jewish prayers and meditations for the deathbed. A wonderful little book. I wrote it. But in it, there is words of comfort for one who is dying. You are loved and you are forgiven. We know you did your very best, or given that you were really, given the hand you got dealt, you did your very best, even if you're an asshole sometimes. You're not going to be alone. We will be here with you, and you will be welcomed by loved ones on the other side. And whenever you're ready, it's okay to leave. We will all be okay. So we want to be able to say to people, I said to my mother, your father's going to be there. My mother's father was killed in a car accident when she was 10 years old. I come to this stuff multi-generationally. She just lit up. Oh, wow. I said, Daddy's probably going to be late. He's probably going to get stuck at Home Depot and CVS, and he's not going to show up on time because he never did. But I think that's the conversation we want to take this and have to people, is that there are guides to help you. One of my clients once said, oh, I'm so afraid my father's stuck, stuck in between worlds. I said, it sounds like you're stuck in between worlds. He's going to be okay. He's going to be able to be guided out of there. Okay, I can't leave you in Gehenna. So I have to get into Gehenna and get you out of there. Oh, here's another one. When God desires to take back a person's spirit, the days they have lived in this world pass in review. This is the life review. One more. I'm going to just do this quickly. So eventually this stage ends, physical separation, right? So we just saw the deathbed visions, the ancestral guides, the mythic beings, the life review corresponds with Chevrah, Kadisha. Then another realm called Gehenna emerges onto the scene. And here's how I want to explain Gehenna. Imagine you have a good friend, his name is Joe, and one day Joe gets really, really furious with you. He kicks you in the shins, he spits in your face. And then 6 months later, I come up to you and I say, whatever happened with your friend Joe? And you go, Joe, did I ever tell you what happened? Oh, my sister-in-law, did I ever tell you what happened with my sister-in-law? I got more problems with my sister-in-law than I do with Joe, right? What's my point? Emotions persist long after the initial point of contact. And while we're alive, we're very good at repressing it. That seems to be a characteristic of us human folk. We're good at shoveling the SH under the rug. So if you did an X-ray, you would see my bone structure. If you did an MRI, you would see my tissue structure. Imagine we could do an emociogram. So here's where we hold anger in the jaw, and here's where we hold grief in the chest, and here's where we hold shame in our midsection. And Louise Hay says you get a bladder infection because you get pissed off, right? What's the point? We hold all of the psycho-emotional stuff in the body. It may be that in death, with the death of the body, there's a certain amount of psycho-emotional residue of the life story that has to be processed before we can go on. That's what Gehenna is. In the old model, Gehenna was the penal colony, and I know exactly what the penal colony looks like because I raised two kids in the same household, and I saw the medieval torture that the first one did to the second one. The newer model is rehab. there seems to be a period of time post-mortem where we have to go through and interact with or complete unresolved psycho-emotional stuff. Okay? You still with me? Okay, so here comes, Yael, I need a little bit of a Shakespearean schmaltz for this one. Now
Okay,
we're
I'm
not doing Zohar. Now we're doing medieval midrash.
Gehenna, purgation. There are 5 kinds of punishments in Gehenna, and Isaiah saw them all. He entered the second compartment, and he saw 2 men hanging by their tongues. And he said, "Oh, you who unveils the hidden, reveal to me the secret of this." He answered, "These are the men who slandered, therefore they are thus punished." He entered the third compartment, and he saw their men hanging by their organs. He said, "Oh, you who unveils the hidden, reveal to me the secret of this." And he answered, "These are the men who neglected their own wives and committed adultery with the daughters of Israel."
Okay, so listen, do not, if your mother or your father or somebody you know is in hospice or dying, don't read them this.
No.
Okay, this is good for pedagogical, educational purposes, because here's the key to understanding this, to unlocking this. Teachings on heaven and hell in religious literature are not literal, they're symbolic. They're symbolic of states of consciousness. The fundamentalists would have you think heaven and hell are locations. I remember when I visit my son at Indiana University in Bloomington, and driving from Bloomington to the airport in Indianapolis, there'd be a sign saying "Avoid hell, repent." And I always had to stop my car and check my GPS to make sure I didn't take the wrong turn. The fundamentalists would have you believe in those things literally. But look at this text. First of all, it's a genre of literature called midah keneged midah. The punishment fits the crime. You sin by the tongue, you're punished by the tongue. You sin by your sexual or by sexuality, you're punished that way. But what would it be to have a moment of time post-mortem where you look at yourself in the mirror, what they call in the 12-step program, the fearless moral inventory, where you could look at your life and see all the times you shot from the lip and were verbally abusive to people you loved? It might feel like hanging from the tongue. What would it be to look at the times you might have acted with impropriety in your intimate relationships and hurt those you love? It might feel like hanging from. So suddenly what you have here with Gehenna is a kind of honest self-encounter of purifying or processing unresolved psycho-emotional stuff. So that's what Gehenna is. It's not torment. It could be torment. Processing your own stuff could be like, could feel like hell. It's like an extended therapy workshop. You with me? You still with me? Okay. So now I have to do. Who was it who asked me before? I'm going to do the Kaddish Gehenna rap about, completing stuff.
That's for Shirley.
That's for Shirley. Okay, so it corresponds with the Kaddish. Now, the teaching is that our saying Kaddish redeems the soul from Gehenna, and I think that's very problematic. Not everybody says Kaddish. Not everybody has progeny who will say Kaddish for them. Right. But I want to do let's see if I can I'm going to stand up again. My Kaddish Gehenna rap. I have to take here's my prayer book. A guy shows up. This is, I'm going to do this as a father and a son, but it's an interactive process. I think it's the essence, not the specifics of it. Guy shows up in shul first day. Kadal Kadash, you SOB, you didn't leave a life insurance policy, you liked your work more than your kids, and now I have to say these stupid words that don't even say anything about death. And the response comes back on the other side and says, and you were a pain in the tuchus to raise. You didn't make my life easy. You were always so busy with your friends. You didn't have time for your family. You didn't make my life easy at all. It's 2 months. It's 3 months. You know what, Dad? I didn't know you. I didn't know who you were at all. I'm saying Kaddish and I have no idea who you were. And the response comes back and says, guess what? I didn't know who I was either. They told me I had to go make a living. I had to get married. What did I know? Now I've had a few months since I died. I've had a chance to realize I don't know myself at all. It's 4 months. It's 5 months. It's not in a timeline, but it's a process. Yit Gadalvi. You know what, Dad? I never heard you say I love you. I never heard you say I love you. And the response comes back and says, listen, I never heard it myself. And of course I love you. I love you very much. And I'm sorry I didn't say that to you. I'm sorry I didn't say that. 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, because you know what, today I really miss you. Today I just really, really miss you. I've been angry, I've been confused, but today I really miss you. And the response comes back and says, listen, I missed you. I made a lot of mistakes. And I hope you can forgive me because I'm really sorry. I see now what I did, and I'm sorry. And it's the last day of St. Kaddish, and we need a better ritual for that. 11 months, Yit Kadal, because you know what, I've been mad, I've been sad, but you know what, Daddy, I love you and I forgive you. And the response comes back and says, look, I love you and I bless you. Take what I've given you and make good of it and let go of the rest, and I bless you. And is that redeeming souls from Gehenna? I don't know, but it sure as hell feels like it. So I think the point that I want to make here, one, is that that there's an ongoing process that takes place after death, and that there's always the possibility of tshuva and redemption. All of this is based upon the possibility of tshuva, of redemption, of healing. And sometimes it takes ages. I've had people report to me they've had a dream about a deceased loved one, and it just changed their whole feeling about it. I've had people work out stuff with their father 20 years after the person was dead. The guy was a raging alcoholic, and 20 years later, doing some therapy, they were able to at least see a different way of telling the story. So I think those relationships, there's always possibility of relationship changing. The latest incarnation of this work is something called constellation work, where you can go in and you can do some therapy work with healing the previous generation. Because if you carry the work of Tirza Firestone, also if you carry the trauma of Holocaust, for example, or other kinds of trauma in your DNA, you can go back retroactively and get freed from that. So
Reb Simcha, we have a couple of questions.
Yeah, please.
We have a couple of people with their hands raised. We'll start with Sarita and then we'll go to Lisa. Sarita.
Yeah, I was just wondering, does everybody go to Gehenna?
Well, the rabbis, actually somebody said something about reincarnation. The rabbis had philosophical discourse whether you can just get reincarnated and not have to deal with Gehenna. I think my sense is, when my father died, he was 86 years old. I was in my early 50s, and I felt like we had some good years in the last 10 years of his life to work through a lot of our earlier stuff. And I think that they say that the minimum amount of time one needs, or the minimum is 30 days, because everybody has some amount of residue, but some souls can just get out of Gehenna really, really quickly. The rabbis would say, avoid Gehenna. They use Gehenna as a carrot and a stick. Avoid Gehenna, do mitzvahs. So studying Torah and doing charitable deeds are all ways, and visiting the sick and all of those kind of strong gemilut chasadim, acts of loving kindness, Jewish values are all ways of avoiding Gehenna. So I think that the goal of all of this stuff is that we live an ethical and moral life. I'm going to talk in a minute about Gan Eden and about Sur HaChaim. The rabbi said 3 times as much as Gehenna as they did about Gan Eden, 3 times as much about purgatory, they called it, as they did about heaven, the Garden of Eden, because they were ethicists more than they were metaphysicians and philosophers. They wanted people to live a moral, ethical life. So the answer is avoid Gehenna, do it now. Clean up, don't wait until you die to clean up your bad karma.
All right, next we have Lisa.
Thank you. Your story, which was very moving actually, about the son and the father, reminded me of something that I learned about the afterlife, but I don't really know what it is, which is you say Kaddish for 11 months or 12 months for a reason.
Yes.
And right that we totally need a ritual for the end of that. But what is that about?
There was a takana, a rabbinic emendation that was done, I think it was like the 11th or the 12th century. No, it's a little bit later because Kaddish doesn't really emerge until after the Crusades anyways. That says you wouldn't think that the maximum length of time in Gehenna, according to rabbinic tradition, is 12 months. You wouldn't think that your parent got the maximum length of time in Gehenna, so you only say it for 11 months. Though some of my clients and my parents should get 24 to 36 months in Gehenna, right? So, but that's at least the understanding.
So we're playing out, even though we don't know about Gehenna. We're playing this out anyway because we're saying
Yeah.
So interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have another question from Sandy.
One more
also.
question, and then please.
Thank you. So this is the first time I ever heard anything but mitzvot to keep us from Gehenna. I've heard many times about mitzvot to more speedily bring Mashiach, but not about Gehenna. So that was new for me. The other thing is that as a child, since I was a child, my father, who's been gone more than 20 years now, but he would repeatedly say, nobody writes to us from the beyond, but we need to behave ethically, morally, mitzvot, whatever. Didn't necessarily use any of those specific terms at any one time, but that it is our job to behave properly in this world, because we don't know what Olam Haba is, but we can't go wrong behaving morally and ethically in Olam Hazeh.
Well, in this world, right? I mean, he sort of picked up some of the overriding philosophy and was influenced by the ethical humanism of his time. The world of the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, it was a time of ethical humanism. So there wasn't an afterlife, but it was trying to live a life of values and a life of meaning.
I don't know that he didn't feel there was an afterlife, and I never thought of my father as being that philosophical about things, but maybe somewhere in his kishkas he was. But that nothing was going to excuse, like tshuva doesn't let us off the hook for today, basically. Thank you.
Right. Well, I teach this stuff not because I think afterlife is the best thing since sliced bread, because I think it helps us deal with grief and loss. I think it helps us deal with dying and death. I mean, that's really where I came to it. When I was 4 or 5 years old and my grandmother died, in those years, there was no such thing as taking kids to funerals. I don't remember anything about Chevrah. They told me that Bubby died, she went to heaven. So I was a dreamy, spacey little kid. I spent the next 5 years talking to her in heaven, which, she taught me everything I had to know about afterlife until I ended up doing the research myself. But I think that it helped me, that connection helped me deal with grief and loss. And I think for people who are yearning in the heart to be able to know those people are still connected to us in some way, shape, or form, I think helps us with with our own experience of grief and loss. Okay, I'm looking at the time. I promised I wasn't going to leave you in Gehenna or else I wouldn't get back here, but I want to do a couple of more texts to finish off that journey. So Kaddish redeems us. Okay, so we're back to our triptych here, right? So then this eventually ends, and here, I can be much more psychological here. This is more metaphysical, a little. Like I said, the rabbis had more to say about Gehenna than about Gan Eden. But let me at least here. Let's read this text. Okay, so this is the Gan Eden text.
Gan Eden has 2 gates of carbuncle, and 60 myriads of ministering angels keep watch. Each of these angels shine like the radiance of the heavens. When the righteous person approaches, angels remove from them clothes in which they had been buried, and clothe them with 8 robes of the clouds of glory, and place upon their head 2 crowns, one of precious stones and pearls, and the other of gold. And they place 8 myrtles in their hand and praise them. And they lead them to a place
where I have to move my graphic. Hang on, let's see if I can do that. Wait, I don't want to lose you in trying to fix my graphic right now. So I'm not going to fix my graphic. Let me just go back to it. You'll forgive me. Wait, am I on screen share? No. Okay, let's do the screen share. Note to self, fix your graphic later. Okay, so here's what I want to say about this one. I got distracted by my graphic. Angels remove from them the clothes in which they had been buried. At a certain point, the soul is relieved of their terrestrial identity, and we take on our celestial identity. Remember, we're talking about consciousness without a body, and all of this is metaphoric. But at a certain point, if you're a meditator, you understand that at a certain point you're able to experience life without a body in those more supernal realms. And it may be, you see, this is very heavenly. This is heaven-like stuff, right? But I think the takeaway from this is that at a certain point we give up our simcha-ness. This is who I am. I'm the son of so-and-so and so-and-so, and I'm born in this cultural context. And if you ask me to say out and about, you even can get my Canadian accent a little bit remains, right? And I'm a baby boomer, and I'm a product of this era. But at some other level, there's a soul being that we each have that transcends our personal identity and our cultural and historical identity. So that's when it says angels remove from them the clothes in which they had been buried and clothe them with the 8 robes of the crown of the clouds of glory. So to know that that's part of what goes on, and that the more time we have spent cultivating our transcendent self, the higher the realm in Gan Eden. There's said to be 7 realms in Gan Eden. So are you going to end up in a Motel 6? Are you going to end up in a Best Western? Or if you're a Kabbalist, it's a Best Western? Or are you going to end up in a penthouse apartment? Or I don't know. I haven't been to Maui, but where are you going to end up? So this corresponds with the Yortzeit. Reciting Kaddish prayers at the time of a Yortzeit, the anniversary of a death, elevates the soul every year to a higher sphere in the heavenly Garden of Eden. So that's what Isaac Luria, the Kabbalist, said. So it's this notion that, again, our prayers affect the state of the soul on the other side. Okay, let's just do this. Then, actually, let me go back. So in some cases, Gan Eden is the end of the road. The rabbis did not have to standardize belief. Let me go off screen. I'm giving you this. I'm giving you a thumbnail sketch. I spent 20 years reading this stuff. There's all kinds of afterlife stuff, all kinds of texts, okay? what it is that the rabbis had to make sure that the Jews who were in Babylonia and the Jews who were in Palestine and then later in the south of Spain were lighting Shabbos candles according to the setting of the sun, or were reading the Megillah according to the cycles of the moon. But if you believe this about afterlife and you believe that, if you believe these are 7 names of Gehenna and someone else believed there were other 7 names of Gehenna, there was a lot of room for midrashic improvisation. So in some cases, Gan Eden is the end of the line. In other cases, there's another realm called Tzror HaChaim. Tzror HaChaim is sort of like mission control for souls. It's said to be a holding tank for souls underneath the throne of God. So here's Tzror HaChaim, and here's mission control.
Rabbi.
Oh, here's the text. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to let you know that we are at the time. So if you can just kind of.
Yeah. Good. So Tzror HaChaim corresponds with the Yortzeit. Okay. And the ancestors are available for intercession. We offer prayers to them. They take care of us. Dan Fennell, you got to wait. They're pulling the plug on me. Fiddler on the Roof is an afterlife story. Between this world and the world beyond is a window and not a wall. That's my final comment on this. Between this world and the world beyond is a window and not a wall. And our Western culture says dead is dead, it's a wall. But our traditional Jewish wisdom says between this world and the world beyond is a window. So just notice for you in your own life when the window opens. Okay. Does Dan get to say anything? Yeah.
I just put something in the chat. There's another talk coming up in a few months by Rabbi Stephen Moss, one of your colleagues, that's going to be done through Temple Sinai about levels of soul and their journeys and so on. So I put information in the chat about that, and people who are interested in joining Temple Sinai's speaker series can send an email. That's at the end of that long chat that I just added there. So
okay, and I just put my website. I just put my website into the chat. So if we need to go, I'm going to go. If you could stay, I could stay. Whatever works.
Don't go yet. We do have a sort of a closing blessing by Rabbi Rav from Kauai, and we just want to thank you and thank everybody so much for being a part of this very special evening.
Quick question, Alice. I know this was recorded. Is there a way? I know people contacted me to say, I'm not going to be able to be there. Can I get the recording?
I will send, once it's ready, we will send you and send all of the co-sponsors.
Great.
We will send you the recording and you can disseminate it to your congregation.
Okay, I would like for Rabbi Rob to close, and then I can close off the recording. And then if you have other questions, we can still continue that way. Okay.
Okay. Reb Simcha, thank you so much for this presentation and for your teaching, your wisdom, and your humor as you help us to understand and have this more about what happens after life and provide this Jewish framework for it. You mentioned in your presentation that we need to practice mindfulness. And so thinking of that, I have a closing blessing to set the tone for this week. God of mercy, let us remember the joys this week so that we bring them into the world as hope. Let us remember pain so that we bring it into the world as healing. Blessed are you, God of love. Let your gifts fill our days. Let your wisdom fill our hearts in service to Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Amen.